Imagine a serene lake basking in the reflection of pearl clouds and its deep blue waters. And all of a sudden, a huge roar, gallons of water containing boulders of ice and rock gushing towards a quaint little town downstream. And within minutes, everything is reduced to rubble. Sends a chill down your spine, doesn't it? No, this is not any anecdote or snippet out of a fairy tale or a story that I have conjured. This is what is happening in reality. And this is going to be our agenda for discussion today. We're talking about a type of flood. Flood, you all know? Flood, normally, when we talk about, is basically normally we talk about in terms of rivers. When the river breaches its banks, when the it is not sufficient, the bank or the channel of the river is not able to hold the water due to excess rainfall or any other such cause, then we call it a flood. But there is a new term which is so called viral these days, that is GLOF, that is a glacial lake outburst flood. So here, although if you have known or come across my way of teaching, I often detest the sensationalism, but to tell you or emphasize the gravity of the situation or the phenomenon that we are facing these days. The GLOS, it is very necessary to discuss the concept behind it, and not only for UPC. Again, the way I teach, although I teach it with a proper structure, the what, the why, the when, and also the way forward, I discuss all the concepts in brief. I try to be brief, because these days there is a trend of the trending shots which you often see in YouTube. So basically, this what we have on the screen right now, this is the lake which I asked or tried all of you to imagine, make you imagine. But this, after the GLOF or the glacial lake outburst floods take place, this is the situation. This is the subsequent, all the ice, the boulders, the rock, the dust, the gravel, the sand, all rushing down, and destruction is caused. Everything is reduced to rubble in its wake, and whatever lies in the path of the water, of the gallons of water that are flowing, they are washed away. So basically, we are going to discuss and emphasize upon what this concept is, and I hope this presentation, which I have made specially for my audience, this you know entices you or enthuses your inspiration and imagination. So basically, let's start with the definition. After all, like Three Idiots, the professor said, the mechanical engineering professor said, definition kya hai? It is very important when you are writing an answer, not just to look smart, but you need to have a way or a medium to express yourself. Okay, so basically, if we divide the various terms, flood, normal, you can understand this word. Then glacial lake. Glacial lake basically is a lake which has been formed due to the recession or the melting of a glacier. And outburst is an additional word which you can think of or visualized as a lake breaching its banks. A lake, how is a lake? Can a lake be defined in visual terms? A lake has to be confined within particular boundaries. But when the water level in that lake exceeds its limit, exceeds its banks, just like in consonance, like we talk about the flood occurring in rivers. That is why it is the word, this outburst is, if you're following my cursor, the outburst word is mentioned here. So, the catastrophic flood that occurs when the dam containing a glacial lake fails, releasing a large volume of water. Now, what are actually the causes? The first thing, can you visualize? Can you tell me? The first thing you can say, excess rainfall. Because climate vagaries and climate change is so predominantly occupied in our minds. But not only climate change, other things also, tectonic activities. In other words, we can talk about, in simple words, we can say earthquakes. Whenever the disturbance in the sediments or the boundaries, obviously they are not concrete boundaries or not steel boundaries which can hold the water of the lake permanently. They are sediments, and they can easily be distorted or easily be displaced by several forces. So we have talked about heavy rainfall, we have talked about earthquakes. Then we can talk about a part of the glacier falling in the water itself, in the lake itself. Okay, so that is a process or fundamental known as the glacial carving. So what happens if, a simple example, you have a glass of water. Okay, you put ice in it. So what will happen? The water level seems to rise. Why is that? Because obviously the ice displaces water. So you don't need to go back to school and study Archimedes principle in order to understand what exactly is happening, right? And of course, anthropogenic activities. Humans are there to wreak havoc upon the nature and everything that is dear to us. So we have activities like dams, the failure of dams, mining, drilling, construction, everything that is capable of disturbing the natural balance of the rocks on the land surface. And of course, we have landslides, avalanches. What happens? I'll just demonstrate with the following diagrams in the next slides. So first of all, we'll understand what a glacier. Okay, if you are overwhelmed by this definition, okay, because being a geography and environment teacher, I tend to focus too much. But in simple words, if you don't want to just hide it, glacier is a swift and fast moving river of not only ice but boulders of sand, gravel, lots of rocks, and ice pieces. So, this is basically a glacier, fast moving river of ice, boulders of rock, clay. So, various terms they can be given. And again, this influence of its own weight and gravity, these are the points which are important because have you heard of potential energy? Of course, you need to understand some, recollect some physics concepts. So obviously, this glacier here is situated on a high altitude. So that is why it is moving down. Basically, due to its weight, and due to its weight, it has potential energy, and it has to come to a. It will always try to come to a balance or maintain balance. So it moves down under the influence of its weight and gravity and slope. So this is basically, don't no need to go into all the other details. Okay, then movement of glacier, this is very important because this will provide us why a glacial lake is being formed in the first place and how it is being formed. So normally if you see, I'll not go into depth. Basically, the glacier is moving in a down the slope, and because of its weight and because of the nature of ice which is moving around with it, it assumes a circular motion. So, because of the weight, it is plucking the sediments along the slope, along the land surface or the mountain surface, and not only it is plucking, it is also depositing these things, this moraines at the end of the glacier. So actually these moraines are nothing but the collection of or accumulation of unconsolidated debris. They are also sometimes referred to as glacial till. So actually, these moraines or the boulder clays or the gravel, this accumulation of gravels, these are the things which form the boundary of the lake. So ultimately, a time will come when during summers or otherwise also this ice will melt and the glacier will recede. It does not mean that it is moving back on its own. It will just assume a position which is higher up. So if I just take a pen here, right? So initially, if it is, this is the, sorry, so if this is the slope and a glacier is situated somewhere like this, okay. So if it is melting, so this part will be removed, it will get converted into water body, and subsequently what will happen is, that a glacier might now be visible only at a higher location, and the lower part of the glacier will be filled up with water. So, this essentially, when it is confined within the boundaries of a particular area like moraines and debris, this circular type of depression that is being formed, so this is known as a tarn or a glacial lake. I'm using a mouse, so pardon my handwriting. So this is a glacial lake or a tarn. So this is the basic formation of a lake. Fine. So moving on, right. So this is the actual photo which you can visualize easily. So we can say what we can see in this picture. Then initially you can imagine that this glacier might have been, to an extent, this entire region might have been covered with glacier, the ice, and subsequently, due to various reasons, maybe it can be due to global warming, maybe due to it can be due to seasonal change. So this front part of the glacier has become melted. Okay, and this has been converted into the water part, and subsequently we call this phenomena the recession, or this recession of glacier. Okay, so this glacier has receded or moved, apparent movement towards the top, and this depression type structure, these moraines which we were talking about, the embankments which are formed by the unconsolidated accumulation of boulders, gravel, clay, this is confining the lake to its surroundings. I just highlight if you cannot visualize. So this region, this circular depression, because of the weight of the glacier, this parabolic depression is formed. So this is basically the moraine and glacier. Okay, the glacier has receded. This is the lake. So you can, important thing to note here is that this lake, this moraine is the unconsolidated sediments, and when due to excess rainfall, landslides, avalanches, cloudbursts, all these anthropogenic activities, the moraines are weakened and the water level increases, the lake is able to breach. This is the moraine breach which is being shown here. So this moraine is getting breached. A gap develops for the water of the excess water of the lake to flow down, and of course these are unconsolidated sediments. Not only will the water flow down, a lot of sediments, huge boulders will flow down along with it and cause widespread devastation, not only in upstream areas but downstream areas, where the water will have a greater tendency and greater ability to spread its wings, to flow and devastate everything lying in its path. Fine. And why the lakes, you might ask, why the lake water is increasing? Because the glaciers are melting, and this is aggravated or exacerbated these days. Why? Due to global warming, climate change. Okay, so moving forward, so this I'm going to share a short animation video, and so that you can visualize what is happening in a GLOF, that is a glacial lake outburst flood. This will make your concept absolutely clear. Just pay attention. I have put some here. I have put some typewritten text so that you can understand what is happening. So this is, we can see the glacial lake is there. It is confined within the moraines, and this is going to be breached. And here the concept of glacial carving will be shown. Subsequently, you will notice it. So what will happen here is that a part of the glacier. due to thawing, due to various fissures which are appearing in the glaciers. The glacier will break apart. A part of the glacier, it will fall into this lake, and then it will displace the water. So the excess water will ultimately breach the moraines. These are the moraines which are there, and then the water flow down the stream, or the river will increase, and it will inundate or flood the entire livelihood and the properties. It will carry away. It will cause a lot of devastation and destruction. So let's get to it. Right. So this is basically what I wanted to show. I hope the concept is clear now. Now we what triggers a GLOF? Now we have covered basically the interesting part, you might say, because there was a lot of animation, a lot of diagrams involved, and my illegible handwriting and diagrams. Anyways, so these are the basic factors, because again, the important point from the point of examination, and also if you want to explain, you should not stammer when someone asks you. Okay, you now know what is a GLOF, but you also need to know the reasons, various reasons. Okay, normally we have the rapid melting of glaciers, glacial calving, that is courtesy global warming, or we can say the El Nino effect. El Nino is a phenomena which I'm not going to deal with in detail in this session, but El Nino, in a general way, it also is responsible for warming, regional warming in a lot of areas. So this is one reason of increasing the water level. The glacial calving we have already discussed. Then we have the heavy precipitation or cloud burst. Heavy precipitation, cloud burst you might have come across, like it recently happened in Chamoli district in Uttarakhand. It keeps on happening in the hilly areas. Basically, the clouds, they get trapped. A little illustration, because without diagrams it actually becomes very difficult. Again, I'll try to make this illustration as simplistic. So these are mountains. So when we talk about the moist winds which are moving upwards, the moist winds moving upwards, what happens when the altitude increases? The temperature of the air decreases, condensation takes place, clouds are formed, and in the upper atmosphere, the wind or the draft is very less or very subtle, so this clouds are not carried away. These clouds are sort of trapped between these mountain ranges, and they grow very large in size, and due to growth in such a massive growth in size, they contain a lot of water, and finally when the saturation level happens, torrential downfall takes place. So if you have heard in the Hindi terms badal fatna, so not every heavy downpour is classified or defined as a cloudburst. The Indian Meteorological Department has given a specific criteria, that is, if 10 centimeter of rainfall is taking place in 1 hour, okay, in 1 hour, in 1 square kilometer of area, then it is classified as a cloudburst. Okay, then we have landslides and avalanches. Landslides are nothing but a huge mass of debris, boulders moving down a slope under the influence of gravity. And what is the difference between landslide and avalanches? Avalanche is basically when the constituents of the material which are moving down the slope under the influence of gravity, they consist primarily of ice and snow. So that is avalanches. Then we have talked about the tectonic movements, earthquakes. Obviously, when the water is getting, we have already discussed the main cause, the water is getting confined within the moraines. So when the earthquake takes place, this will be the waves, the energy waves will distort these sediments, and the water might get a way out to breach the banks. And finally, human activities, hydropower projects, mining, drilling, etc. All that distorts the structure or foundation of a particular glacial lake. Fine. Moving ahead. So these I have summarized some of the major causes, the important causes behind the cloudburst. So here we have A mentions the cloudburst, B is snow avalanche, C is not mentioned here, C is included here. So you can see the difference here. It is rock the solid rock particles, gravel, sand, sediments, boulders. Here it is primarily ice. Obviously, ice will also carry a lot of sediments along with it, which is responsible for causing the major component of avalanche. So these are three major causes. Then we have melting of ice, that is glacial calving. The ice itself is falling into the lake and it is displacing the water. And finally, earthquake and overflow. So all these major causes should be clear. It will diversify your answer. Fine. So this is just a stat to again emphasize, augment the gravity of the situation, which I'm trying to point out time and again. Up to 15 million people face the risk of catastrophic flooding from glacial lakes, which could burst their natural dams at any moment. And those facing the greatest threat live in mountainous countries in Asia and South America. So Asia, you might have heard. Basically, we have the Himalayas in the north. It is not only Himalayas. If we go west from the Himalayas, we have the Hindu Kush mountains also. A lot of those components of or sub branches of Hindu Kush mountains, they lie in Pakistan and Afghanistan as well. So they are also sources, perennial sources of spring water, lakes. So these are also the people living in vicinity. Why they have established their livelihoods or their settlements in the vicinities of these lakes because of the close access to water. But again, if such a kind of devastating GLOF or GLOF takes place, then the communities will be devastated or destroyed on a large scale. Some other important or interesting facts which I came across: most dangerous of glacial basins. I have mentioned Pakistan, our so-called friendly neighborhood Pakistan. So these some of the dangerous glacial valleys in Pakistan is in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa region. This is highly prone to devastating GLO waves. Okay, fine. Just an additional fact that just I came to my mind. Shaheen Shah Afridi, a Pakistani cricketer, he hails from this region. Okay, anyways. Then in Peru is a country in South America. There is a great mountain range Andes on the western coast of South America, or the eastern coast or the eastern part of the Pacific Ocean, the eastern coast of eastern side of the Pacific Ocean. So this Peru, there is the Santa Basin. So this is highly prone to landslides, this glacial lake outburst floods. Then in Bolivia is a landlocked country in South America, adjacent to Peru itself. So here we have the Beni Basin. So sometimes case study or examples you should know, which will come in handy in writing answers or making you appear smart. Okay, and it has been said the glaciers across the Andes have undergone rapid deglaciation, that is, the rapid melting, over the last 20 years due to climate change. In India, in Himalayas itself, 25 glacial lakes and water bodies have witnessed an increase in water spread area since 2005. There has been a 40% increase in water spread in India, China, and Nepal, posing a huge threat to Indian states and union territories. Six are Himalayan states itself, like Jammu and Kashmir, Ladakh, Himachal Pradesh, Sikkim, Assam, and Arunachal Pradesh. So this is a very heightening point of concern which we need to keep in mind. Fine. So this is again an actual example of what happened quite recently in October 3, 2023, in the South Lonak Lake. This is a lake situated in Sikkim. So I'll try to demonstrate what exactly is this picture. The above and below, the contrasting picture. The picture below is the aftermath of what has happened in the South Lonak Lake in Sikkim. So here you can see this. These are the moraines. These are the moraines which are confining the lake. Fine. Here you can see the moraines have been displaced due to, the scientists have determined two major factors behind this glacial lake outburst flood or this flooding. One is the carving of ice. The ice, the glacier, has displaced these moraines, and excess rainfall or cloudburst. So these moraines or these embankments have caused the excess ice, the glacier, to flow into this lake. And what has happened is, this breach you can see in this diagram. Okay, the breach is already taken place. What will happen after the breach has taken place? The excess water has already flown out from this lake. So you can see a decrease in the water level, okay, as compared to this. So the water has flown down and caused widespread devastation in the downstream areas, particularly in the Chungthang region of Sikkim. I'll just show you another diagram next. So here, what exactly happened? So cloudburst took place over the South Lonak Lake. This is the Lonak River. Just follow my cursor. Fine. So this is the Lonak River, and because cloudburst took place, the glacial lake outburst flood took place. Subsequently, glacial calving was one of the reasons. And here we have a large Chungthan dam, and there is a huge dam, huge multi-purpose project also, that is the Tista Dam. This is the Tista River, one of the major rivers and point of contention or conflict with respect or regard to the interwater sharing between India and Bangladesh, because ultimately this river Tista flows into Bangladesh. Anyways, we will not go that into that. So not only the water, it spread and devastated these downstream areas. It is very near Gangtok. It also destroyed some of the parts of these dams under construction. Okay, so this is the basic point or example which you need to keep in mind. Then this was a GLOF. This is an actual picture of GLOF in Chamoli district in Uttarakhand. So again, flash flood of water. It was probably due to the glacial carving, which we have been talking about now and again. Gigantic chunk of ice separating from a glacier. If you remember the horrific or mind heart wrenching disaster that took place in Kedarnath in 2013, so that was due to the cloudburst or the high intensity rainfall. So here in 2013, high intensity rainfall was the main cause. In contrast to this, in Chamoli district, again some rivers like Rishi Ganga, Dholi Ganga is one of the tributaries of the Alaknanda river. Alaknanda later it merges with Bhagirathi downstream to form the mighty Ganges or the Ganga river. So these are fast flowing swift rivers. So they just need a trigger or impetus, some landslide, some cloud burst, some glacial carving to displace the massive amount of water and cause widespread devastation downstream. Fine. So recently in the news, it was mentioned that the Uttarakhand government, because some measures have to be taken place, because this climate change now, it is appearing that it is more or less irreversible. We have to adapt and mitigate the changes. So the best aspect or the best technique to do that is to categorize or recognize, identify the most vulnerable lakes. So some of the important lakes which are highly vulnerable and fall in the A category. This is the state of Uttarakhand. You can see here they are the Himalayan ranges. So you can see Vasundhara Tal. This is a lake in the Chamoli district, fed by the river Dholi Ganga. Then Maban in the Pithoragarh region. Okay, then we have unnamed lake in the Dharma Basin, Pyungru in Pithoragarh, then again in Pithoragarh in the Kutitangi Valley. So these are intensely highly vulnerable to glacial lake outburst floods. Right? So again, NDMA, National Disaster Management Authority guidelines. So these NDMA guidelines, National Disaster Management Authority, is the major authority to look after, rehabilitate, to perform search and rescue operations, to save the people who are, to minimize losses, the people who are stuck in the disaster, and the way forward. So, first, we have discussed in brief in the previous slide identifying potentially dangerous lakes based on field observation, record of past events, and we can also discussed about based on the factors, geomorphological and geotechnical characteristics of the lake and other physical conditions. Okay, then we have the enhancing early warning systems. Okay, you just need to remember some keywords. We know don't need to understand the internal intricacies of what actually constitutes or how an early warning system is developed. Right now the number of implemented and operational GLOF early warning systems is quite less, and in fact, there are at least three reported instances, two in Nepal and one in China, of implementation of sensor and monitoring based technical systems for GLOF early warning. Then channeling potential floods. You can see these icons. I have also put so channeling potential floods by this is a pump. So excess water sometimes it can be siphoned off or removed from one excess lake or particular basin to another to reduce or mitigate the harmful effects in case there is a chance of a deadly or devastating glacial lake outburst flood taking place. Fine. And controlled breaching, for example, I showed you the breach. So if the water from that lake, if the moraine is breached, if the water is very high level, the slow and gradual controlled breaching or release of water can be allowed to mitigate or adapt to the effects of a devastating GLOF. Then we have the use of technology, this synthetic aperture radar imagery. Again, we don't need to, I'm just mentioning this term. This term related to NASA, the space organization of US. It is very pertinent with this regard, and this is very important in with respect to the UPSC. It is always in the news these days, time and again. And of course, uniform codes for construction, this haphazard urbanization, this construction, mining and drilling without actually doing a proper environmental impact assessment. This needs to stop, especially in the vulnerable zones. Then training, we can also talk about the training of local manpower. So we can talk about the manpower training. So basically, what happens is normally when a disaster takes place, there's a lot of local communities. They just surround, but they don't have a particular or any specific idea how to rescue people. So a lot of that needs to be managed, and it has been observed that over 80% of search and rescue is carried out by the local community before the intervention of the state machinery itself. Okay, and we can use comprehensive alarm systems, of course, digital India, and instead of playing games on the mobile, the the people or the general citizens, they need to be aware of any alerts which are issued by the state or the central government using cell phones, in the cell phones or smartphones. Fine. So this was basically what I wanted to discuss with you. As so, I hope you enjoyed this elaborated lecture. I tried my best to try to share it as in an as lucid a manner as possible. So keep calm, keep studying, and see you till next time. Jai Hind.